This is Freshly Squeezed True Crime, a Florida-only true crime podcast. I'm Suhaili, and before we get to this week's juicy episode, I ask you to visit the website at fstcpodcast.com, where you'll find all of our social media platforms as well as the newest episodes. And also, find us on YouTube, where we'd like you to follow us, subscribe, share it, do all the things. So, pour yourself a tall glass of orange juice and let me tell you a story. Winter Park, a city in Orange County, as part of the Orlando-Kissimmee-Sanford, Florida metropolitan area. It was founded as a resort community in the late 19th and 20th centuries. The population stands at 29,795 according to the 2020 Census Bureau. The area is comprised of 80% white, 7% black, and 6% Hispanic Latino. The area to the northeast of Park Avenue is the most affluent part, with an average household income of $44,000. There are still houses with significantly higher incomes within these parts. The Via Streets are the most affluent neighborhoods. The area includes the Isle of Sicily, a private drive that juts out into Lake Maitland with extremely expensive houses and residents such as Doc Rivers and Carrot Top. To the east of Park Avenue, the area is slightly less affluent, with an average household income of $32,000. Many of these are still very expensive lake-fronted properties. The lowest income area is the West Park Avenue, with an average household of $23,000. Many of these houses include those built on the non-for-profit organization Habitat for Humanity. There is no local middle school or elementary school in this area. Most notably, Fred Rogers, yes, that Mr. Rogers, graduated from Winter Park's Rollins College, where he also met his future wife, Joanne. In later years, they spent most winters in the town. That was your moment of serenity before I begin this episode. On Monday, February 24th, 2020, at 1:01 p.m., Orange County deputies responded to the Tealwood Park Apartments located at 4748 Frantz Lane, number 3 in Winter Park, in reference to a female reporting that her boyfriend, Jorge Torres Jr, of 3 years, was deceased. The caller, later identified as Sarah Kathryn Boone, then 42, reported playing a game of hide-and-seek. Sarah and George jokingly thought it would be funny if George got into the suitcase located in the living room. Sarah zipped George in the suitcase. Sarah mentioned that she and George had been consuming alcohol during the night, and when she went upstairs and passed out in her bed. She later woke up to the cell phone ringing multiple times around 11 a.m. She went downstairs and did not see George anywhere in the apartment. She then realized that he might be still in the suitcase. Sarah unzipped the suitcase and found George unresponsive and not breathing. Shortly after the 911 call, deputies arrived on the scene. Orange County Fire Department confirmed that George was in fact deceased at 1:07 p.m. The decedent was found laying near the front door of the residence near a blue suitcase. A small laceration was evident on the deceased's lip and would appear to be some bruising around his eye. Investigation Officer Chelsea Coppelspell and Detective Scott Lowen conducted an auto-recorded interview with Boone at 4:57 p.m. in Officer Connolly's unmarked car outside of her residence. The sworn recorded statement reads as follows. I read verbatim to Sarah her constitutional Miranda warnings. Sarah agreed she understood what I had just read to her. On February 23, 2020, at approximately 4 p.m., Sarah was located at her residence along with her boyfriend George, who resides at the apartment. Only Sarah and George were located at the residence at the time. Sarah's son Lucas Boone, age 9 at the time, would sometimes be at her residence when it was her days per the custody agreement she had with her ex-husband. Sarah said she and George were painting pictures and completing puzzles while sharing a bottle of Woodbridge Chardonnay wine. As the evening went on, Sarah said she and George decided to play a game of hide-and-seek. Their words, not mine. Sarah hid upstairs in the shower first and said George never came to look for her. After a while, she decided to go downstairs, where she found George. Sarah and George both thought it would be funny if she zipped George in the blue suitcase that was located downstairs in the living room area, which had a few miscellaneous items they had both planned to donate. George willingly got into the suitcase and Sarah zipped up the suitcase, but 2 of George's fingers were able to stick out of the suitcase. Sarah and George were both laughing that she zipped him up in that suitcase. Sarah explained that the attached handle that made it easier to zip the suitcase up was broken, but a paper clip was in the zipper, and she was able to zip it up. On February 24th, 2020, at 12:30 a.m., Sarah decided she was going to go upstairs while George was still located in that suitcase, thinking he could get himself out. Sarah laid down in her bed and fell asleep about 20 to 30 minutes after going upstairs. Sarah assumed George was going to get out of the suitcase and come to bed as well. Sarah said neither she nor George was drunk from the wine. Sarah woke up in the morning and heard her cell phone ringing multiple times but ignoring the calls. Sarah said her cell phone was left downstairs from the night prior. She knew her ex-husband Brian Boone was calling because he was the only person who would call repeatedly to see if she was getting their son from school. She stayed upstairs for a while and assumed George was downstairs on the laptop looking for employment. She went downstairs at 11 a.m. and realized she could not find George anywhere in the apartment. Sarah freaked out and remembered the last time she saw George was in the suitcase. Sarah unzipped the suitcase and found George unresponsive. She called Brian back and told George was dead and begged him to come to the residence. Brian only resides a few minutes away. When Brian got to the residence, he walked into the apartment, saw George unresponsive on the floor, and told Sarah she needed to call 911. Brian then immediately walked out and stayed there until law enforcement arrived, aka he said fuck that shit, while Sarah followed instructions from the 911 operator. A few things about Brian. Brian and Sarah were married August 21st, 2004, and separated on 9/11/2017. It was Brian who filed for a divorce and said it was due to irreconcilable differences and irretrievably broken. They were not partners. She was more of a dependent of Brian. It should be noted that in the parenting plan between Brian and Sarah, Sarah was prohibited from consuming alcoholic beverages while caring for their son. The final judgment was granted on June 15, 2018. The Boones shared 50-50 custody of their child. However, Brian was awarded the marital home, was to pay child support and alimony. On February 18, 2022, 2 years after the arrest, Brian's alimony and child support payments were terminated, and he was granted full custody of Lucas. During the divorce proceedings, Sarah met George through a mutual friend. George was originally from Pennsylvania, and he had a large family that had moved to Central Florida. He had 5 brothers and 1 sister. He had been married twice before. One marriage produced 2 daughters and a son, Anna, Destiny, and George Jr. All of his children were located still in Pennsylvania and living with their mother, whom George had a contentious relationship with regarding money. She felt that he was very handsome, funny. She said he was smart, and they really hit it off. They had so much in common, but it was more of a misery loves company type of relationship. They were both divorced. They both loved music. They both loved to drink a lot and smoke cigarettes. They both seemed to feel like their exes controlled the situation as it pertained to their children, which made sense as they were both struggling financially. They were not on a great, successful track record or going to do great things with their lives. Their struggles were based on their own poor decision making and lack of professional skills. On February 24th of 2020, Sarah gave verbal and written consent by signing waivers and affidavits for the Orange County Sheriff's Office to search her iPhone XS. Digital forensic investigator Junella Udon responded to the scene and began to download the cell phone. While the cell phone was being downloaded, 2 videos were found on the cell phone. The first video began recording on February 24, 2020 at 11:12 p.m. George repeatedly yelled out Sarah's name. Sarah told George, "For everything you've done to me, fuck you." Sarah was laughing when she said fuck you. Stupid. George repeatedly called out to Sarah's name, Sarah, Sarah, Sarah. George said, "I can't fucking breathe." Sarah replied, "That's on you." "Oh, that's what I feel like when you cheat on me," Sarah said. "You should probably shut the fuck up, and for everything you've done to me." In this video, the suitcase was facing downward, and you can see George pushing on the suitcase in an attempt to get out. The video is 2 minutes and 3 seconds long. The second video began recording on February 24th at 8:20 p.m. George yelled out Sarah's name. The suitcase was now in a different position facing upwards and moved towards the left side of the living room. That video was 22 seconds long. On February 25th, 2020, Jorge Torres Jr. received an autopsy at the medical examiner's office. During the autopsy of the 5'3", 103-pound man, it was noted that George had injuries. George had long scratch nails to his mid-upper back, a large nail scratch to the back of his neck, contusions to the left shoulder, left skull, and forehead contusions considered blunt force trauma, and a cut near his busted lip, a black eye, and blunt impacts around his body. Based on the findings, it was estimated that George had been in the suitcase for up to 11 hours or more. It was determined that his manner of death was homicide, as he had died of asphyxiation. On February 25, 2020, at 3 p.m., Sarah drove herself to the Orange County Sheriff's Office for a follow-up interview, located at 2500 West Colonial Drive, Orlando. Investigating Officer Cosbell and Detective Loden conducted the audio-video recorded interview. The following synopsis of Boone's sworn recorded statement. I read verbatim to Sarah her constitutional Miranda warnings. Sarah agreed she understood what I had just read to her. After informing Sarah about the injuries to George's body, she continued to deny that any physical altercation had occurred between the two of them. Sarah was shown the approximate 2-minute video that she recorded on her cell phone. Not even halfway through, Sarah no longer wished to watch the video. Sarah said she did not remember making the 2 videos. Sarah said the videos looked, quote, bad. She did not intentionally leaving George in that suitcase. Sarah was asked why she intentionally went upstairs and waited for George to come upstairs, and she did not check on him or let him out prior to going upstairs. Sarah replied, I don't know. Sarah contradicted her original statement and began to blame the consumption of alcohol. Sarah was informed she was not free to leave and was under arrest. Deputy Sheriff Lisa Donnellan responded to Central Operations to transport Sarah Boone to Booking and Release Center. Based on Sarah's inconsistent statements on what occurred and the videos found on Sarah's iPhone, she believed probable cause existed to charge Sarah Boone with second-degree murder. Jorge Torres Jr. is dead, and his death was caused by Sarah Boone's criminal act. Sarah zipped George up in a suitcase to where he could not get out. George begged Sarah repeatedly, telling her he could not breathe, and Sarah left him in the suitcase, therefore proves the unlawful killing of George by Sarah's actions that were imminently dangerous and demonstrated a depraved mind without regard for George's life. Boone was held without bail. On February 27, 2020, Boone appeared before Judge Julie H. O'Kane and entered a plea of not guilty. Prior to his death, George had been arrested multiple times for alleged instances of domestic violence against Boone, and she had been arrested one time for an alleged instance of domestic violence against Torres. Boone and Torres began dating in March 2016. However, Boone had been arrested once for alleged battery by strangulation against Torres on July 25, 2018, when both Boone and Torres were arrested. However, her charge in that case was dismissed. She told investigators she was dragged upstairs by Torres and kicked in the right eye after talking to a guy at a bar. At the time, Torres told investigators she tried to strangle him, and that if he did not kick her off him, she would have made him incapacitated. In the affidavit, deputies said they weren't able to tell who the primary aggressor was, as they both refused medical treatment, as well as refusing to write a statement and or sign any dating violence paperwork. Torres had been arrested 3 times in 2019, to include June 15, 2019, Boone alleged being beaten about the face, head, legs, and arms, and threatened to kill her. This case was dropped by the prosecution. August 28, 2019, Boone alleged of being punched in the head, flung off the bed, and pulled by the hair. This case was dropped by the prosecution, and his last arrest was on September 4, 2019. Boone alleged being punched on the left ear and the side of the face. This case was dropped by the prosecution. There was a temporary injunction for protection in place at the time. Boone bailed George out of jail each time. 8 different attorneys who represented her withdrew, 7 of them having been court-appointed. Who has 8 attorneys? Well, Sarah Boone. Boone was known for her destructive behavior, such as gaslighting, constant complaints to the judge, and her interference with her own defense strategy. Boone would often have her own idea for her defense that clashed the strategy proposed by the attorneys, such as refusing to cooperate with an expert witness chosen for battered spouse syndrome defense. This created an environment of irreconcilable differences. Do you see a pattern? And a breakdown in attorney-client relationship. Boone sent letters to the judge complaining about her legal representation, which contributed to attorney withdrawals. Finally, communication issues. Sarah's desire for her attorneys to be constantly available and her complaints about not being included in her case further complicated their relationships. Such a frequent turnover of defense lawyers creates a cascade of challenges in criminal proceedings. It disrupts cases' continuity, undermines strategic coherence, and strains court patience. The constant need to onboard new attorneys wastes resources and risks overlooking crucial evidence. This revolving door of counsel erodes client trust, complicates plea negotiations, and may negatively influence jury perception. Judge Michael Kranick ruled that Boone had forfeited her right to court-appointed counsel. Cut off from the supply of public defenders on July 18, 2024 at a hearing where Boone was representing herself, she submitted a letter that included a hand-drawn advertisement for a lawyer. Basically, she quickly learned that being a criminal defense attorney is much more difficult than it appears. The help wanted ad drafted from her jail cell was circulated by the media, reporting on the following, and Boone found representation by attorney James Owens, who represented her pro bono. We all gotta start from somewhere, am I right? Owens, her ninth attorney, met with state prosecutors about a possible plea agreement to the charge of manslaughter in exchange for a 15-year sentence, which Boone ultimately rejected. This would come back to haunt her. Owens faced a lot of challenges. To begin, there had been interviews, witness depositions, detective reports, testimony from forensic experts, and psychological evaluations. He had to review and evaluate all the work that was done and not done by the previous 8 attorneys and fix whatever problems may have occurred. You don't get to reset the clock. Another significant disadvantage for Owens in this situation was the limited time to catch up on all the necessary tasks, let alone develop a new defense strategy. He was responsible for knowing everything there was to know about the case and being prepared to go to trial once the date was set. Now, let's pause for a minute and discuss battered women syndrome. It's defined as a pattern of signs and symptoms displayed by a woman who has suffered persistent, intimate partner violence, psychological, physical, or sexual from her partner, usually a male. Although the diagnosis has mainly centered on women, it has occasionally been applied to men when employing the term battered syndrome, especially as part of a legal defense. It has classified in the ICD International Classification of Diseases, but not in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. The condition was first researched extensively by Lauren E. Walker, who used Martin Spellman's learned helplessness theory to explain why women stayed in relationships with abusive men. Victims may exhibit a range of behaviors including self-isolation, suicidal thoughts, and substance abuse, and signs of physical injury or illness, such as bruises, broken bones, or chronic fatigue. It may be diagnosed as subcategory of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. The condition is the basis for the battered women legal defense that has been used in cases of physically and psychologically abused women who have killed their male partners. As a legal defense, it may be incorporated in defenses such as self-defense, provocation, and insanity-based defenses. The term battered women syndrome has been criticized by some survivor advocates as being outdated terminology not used outside of court. After multiple delays, including the COVID-19 pandemic and Hurricane Milton, and a string of attorneys, the trial began on Monday, October 14, 2024. Prior to the jury selection, Boone asked the court for daily snacks during her 10-day trial. Yes, she asked for snacky snacks, to include 2 Capri Suns, 5 peppermints, 2 bags of chips, a bag of candy, and a bag of Oreo cookies or Pop-Tarts. I shouldn't have to say this, but her motion was denied. The tricky process of jury selection is finding impartial jurors in such a high-profile case. People who hadn't already formed opinions about Boone's guilt or innocence truly start with a clean slate. The court screened over 150 potential jurors for the murder trial, ultimately selecting a jury of 6 with 8 alternates who were sworn in on October 18, 2024. Assistant State Attorney William J. began opening arguments. The judge had discretion over whether to seat a 12-member jury or a jury of 6. Judges often prefer smaller juries to expedite the judicial process, especially in cases where court resources are limited. The final jury composition reflected careful consideration of various factors, including potential biases, personal backgrounds, and the ability to serve for the trial's duration. The selected jurors represent a cross-section of the community, which was crucial for ensuring a fair trial. The court also implemented special measures to prevent selected jurors from being exposed to media coverage during the trial. These precautions included daily reminders not to discuss the case or view related news coverage, and restrictions on social media use related to the case. The defense argued that Boone suffered from battered woman syndrome, which caused her to leave Torres Jr. zipped inside the suitcase because she feared he would kill her if she let him out. Prosecutor Jay argued that this defendant zipped George Torres shut in a suitcase and was not in imminent danger when she refused to let him out. She was able to do this because at the time of his death, he weighed 103 pounds. She did this with the malicious intent to punish him, and then she went up to sleep and left him to take his final breaths on this earth alone. Boone took the witness stand, and her nearly 5-hour testimony was a long-awaited moment in the murder trial. Boone stated, "I wanted him to try to understand how I felt. Maybe he could progress and be a better person." 2 Orange County deputies were called on Wednesday by the defense, confirming they responded to domestic calls at the couple's winter home park in 2019. Other witnesses called on by the defense include psychologist Dr. Julie Harper, who stated she diagnosed Boone with PTSD. In rebuttal, the state called on the behavioral health expert who conducted a court-ordered evaluation of Boone, Dr. Tanya Werner. According to Werner, the woman did not give her enough information while in jail on October the 2nd to diagnose her with PTSD, adding that she had a different opinion on Boone's actions. The way that she described the incident to me, and that they were laughing and having a good time, and didn't play into relaying any kind of triggers or trauma, Dr. Werner testified. Closing arguments were on October 25th, 2024, and on the same day, after less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict for second-degree murder. Boone appeared flushed moments after the verdict was read, but did not have a visible reaction. After mounting a defense that Boone was a victim of battered spouse syndrome, her attorney described Boone's reaction after the guilty verdict was read. "She's just shocked. She's shocked, Boone's attorney James Owens said. "She felt like, she had a defense, as you know, so she wasn't shocked. She said she would call me tomorrow morning so we'll talk some more after she's had some time to think about it. I've had some time to think about it. We're obviously very disappointed." Attorneys of the state said the decision brought some closure to the Torres family. "I think after 4.5 years and the numerous delays, I think they were finally just happy to see this case go to trial, able to put this one in the books," said David Cacciatore. Several of Torres' family members spoke ahead of the sentencing about the impact of his death. In a tearful statement, his mother, Blanca Torres, said, quote, "I don't hate her for what she did. When officers came to my house, they asked me to sit. I never think that they said my son was dead. Since that day, I can't sleep, and it's hard for me to think about that moment. My son is not here no more. She killed a father, a brother, an uncle. Now it's like something is missing. Sometimes when I look out the window, I'm waiting for him to come and say, 'Mom, I love you.' I can't see him no more. I love him and I miss him a lot. But you know what? I was blessed. She ain't going to be blessed like me because I had my son. I raised him. I have his children, my granddaughter, my grandson, and she's not going to be able to have that. I did. I raised him. He wasn't perfect, but he was a very good son," she said. Torres' sister, Victoria Torres, said to Boone, "Sarah Boone deserves to rot in jail. Sarah has caused a lifetime of pain, a lifetime of horrible images. For you all, this is just a moment. For me and my family, it's forever. I just hope that we can truly get justice for my brother." One of his daughters, Ana Victoria Torres, said the death of her incredible father has left her with chronic depression and anxiety. In the first year after his death, she woke up screaming every morning or night, wishing I was having a nightmare, only to wake up and remember all over again that my father was gone. Boone also took the stand. before the sentencing and described being abused by Torres. She said that Torres slapped, kicked, punched, spit on, raped, stabbed, choked, pulled, dragged, whipped, tripped, stole from, lied, terrorized, threatened, humiliated, forced, degraded, made to cry, end me, defeat me, or destroy me. I forgive George for beating me senseless. I forgive myself for falling in love with a monster, and no matter how grotesque he may have become, I still loved him, hoped, and forgave. I also forgive the Torres family, his mother and father foremost, also his 2 ex-wives and daughters, all for knowing who George was capable of and has done in the past, his history of violence and where he learned it. Then, to keep turning a blind eye when I asked for help, I forgive them for caring too late. In the end, I forgive myself for not choosing my life sooner, for not being braver, vigilant, bolder, and outspoken, stronger mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, for being hopeless, desperate, simple-minded, weak, and inexperienced. I forgive myself for not knowing I was living a life of domestic violence, and the vicious cycle never ends. This was her unhinged 29-minute apology/statement before her sentencing. Somewhere in the middle, she manages to actually apologize and state that this was all an accident and never her intent. She asked George, his family, the judge, and the planet to forgive her. She doubled down. When you forgive, you heal, and when you heal, you move forward. On December 2nd, 2024, Boone was sentenced to life in the Florida Department of Corrections. It should come as no surprise that Boone sent a 28-page letter to Judge Cranick after being sentenced, calling him ignorant and biased, stating she was the victim. By your clear error and full-blown unfair bias against me since your involvement in my crucible case as a whole, I have been unsuccessful in receiving anything from you as a supposed fair and neutral judge, except for your wish that I spend the rest of my life in prison. It goes on to say she forgives the judge and signed it. I am not a murderer, I am a survivor. Immediately upon receiving her sentence, an appeal was filed. She is inmate U-72509 at Lowell Annex. This episode was squeezed to perfection. First Few Squeezed is hosted and written by me, Sue Haley, and executive produced by Ebony. Still thirsty and need more? Visit us at fstcpodcast.com for links to all our social media handles, including YouTube. Want to keep the juice flowing? Make a donation by buying us a glass. And as always, cheers.